Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Wall of Power of Radio Hour. This is your host, Paul Metsa. I have a great guest on the phone tonight from Los Angeles, author, drummer, and cool cat Pat Thomas. He has a great new book out called Did It, Jerry Rubin, an American Revolutionary. It's on the Fantagraphics Books label and available in finer record stores everywhere. The Overstuffed Coffee Table book is not only the first biography of the infamous and ubiquitous Jerry Rubin, co-founder of the Yippies, anti-Vietnam War activist, Chicago 8 defendant, social networking pioneer, and a proponent of the Yuppie era. But it's a visual retrospective with countless candid photos, personal diaries, and lost newspaper clippings. It includes correspondence with Abbie Hoffman, Norman Mailer, John Lennon, Yoko Ono, Eldridge Cleaver, the Weathermen, and interviews with more than 75 of Rubin's friends, foes, and comrades. It reveals Rubin's and the Yippies' historical and bizarre personal interactions with the like of Allen Ginsberg, Bob Dylan, Charles Manson, Mick Jagger, and other iconic figures of the era. And now, all the way from L.A., Pat Thomas. Pat, you wrote a hell of a book.
Well, thank you. It took me 5 years. Basically, for your listeners who can't obviously see the book, it weighs 5 pounds. It's bigger than an album cover. There is about 150,000 words of text, interviews, and about 400 incredible images of photographs of Phil Oakes, Ginsberg, Rubin, Abbie Hoffman, etc., as well as we mentioned, letters from Eldridge Cleaver, Yoko Ono, Weather Underground, etc. So it's the world's biggest Yippie scrapbook.
So what was the genesis for writing the book, Pat?
I decided to go back to college in my late 40s, and one of the professors pulled me aside and he said, you're older and smarter than, the 20-year-old sitting in this classroom.
And better looking.
And better looking, right. He said, would you like to do something where you could take a semester off and work from home?
Oh, nice.
And I had been thinking about that there's already 6 different books out there about Abbie Hoffman that have all, come out over the last 30 plus years, but nobody had ever done anything about Jerry. And so this project really started as a school project, if you will. And so I took a semester off. This is about 6 years ago, wrote about 30,000 words, and thought it might come out maybe as a simple $10 paperback. As you know, Paul, I wrote a book in 2012 called Listen, Whitey, The Sounds of Black Power. That
Great
was also
book, by the way.
Yeah, kind of a merger of the Black Panthers and music. And anyway, that had sold reasonably well. And so my publisher said to me, I don't want a $10 Jerry Rubin paperback. I want a giant Jerry Rubin coffee table book.
Wow, incredible.
So long story short, I met Jerry died in the 90s. I met Jerry's widow, and she literally invited me to move into her home for 6 weeks. And so I moved in, and she had 10,000 items, just in boxes. And I went through all this stuff, and I had a young kid with a scanner, and we scanned 5,000 things. And then she took out her Rolodex, and she said, hey, let me call Paul Krasner for you. Let me call Rennie Davis.
Wow.
And it was incredible. Let me call Bobby Seale.
Wow.
And she introduced me to, some of these guys I already knew. Some of them I didn't. And it was quite a ride,
Where were you going to college at that time, Pat?
I went to Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington.
I've played there.
Yeah, well, Evergreen is, much like Madison, Wisconsin, or Berkeley, or Lawrence, Kansas, or Ithaca, it's this hotbed of, counterculture. And so the Evergreen runs their undergrad program sort of like a master's program, which was why I was able to do what I did. You know what I mean? In other words, most state schools, you couldn't take a semester off to do your own thing, but at Evergreen, you could,
Well, the other It's a lovely campus. I've actually played there twice. But I believe Nirvana played one of their first gigs at Evergreen College. And another famous alumni, besides you, Pat Thomas, is Michael Richards, the Kramer character on Seinfeld.
And what's his name who created Simpsons? Matt...
Henning.
Is it Henning?
Groening. Yeah, Matt Groening.
Yeah, Mike Groening, great. So there's some illustrious alumni there, to say the least.
So where did Jerry's widow live?
Well, Jerry was living in L.A. in 1994 when he got hit. He was jaywalking. He got hit by a car. So
well, of course he was jaywalking. I mean, I don't mean to downplay the tragedy, but of course he was jaywalking.
He was jaywalking. Anyway, I never thought that I would live in L.A. And I spent the last 25 years in the Bay Area, and then of course Seattle. And so I pretty much moved to L.A. just to do this book, and I wound up staying here. So there you have it.
What with that 5,000 items. That you were scanning and such a broad story with so many important historical figures. Where did you decide to this is where we're going to start the story, and how does the book begin?
Well, the book actually kicks off with, this is a great story. I love telling the story. I went to New York to interview, some people. And I was sitting in a cafe with a guy named Ratso Sloman.
Sure.
Who, if you're a Dylan fan, he did the Rolling Thunder Diary, right? Or whatever he called it.
Yeah. And
so I'm sitting with Ratso, and he says to me, Jerry Rubin lived right across the street in the early 70s. And he goes, and I know the guy who took over the apartment from Jerry.
Wow.
And he still has some of Jerry's mail. Let's go over there.
Well, take what you have gathered from coincidence, like Bob Dylan said, and it's all over now, baby blue, right?
Yeah. So keep in mind that this is like, say, 2013, and Jerry moved out in 1972. Okay? Mm-hmm. So I go over there, and this guy has a letter from Norman Lear, producer and director of All in the Family, to Jerry.
Right.
And basically what the letter said, Jerry, see, this is why I love Jerry. He never missed an opportunity. When All in the Family started, it actually was not that popular. It took a few seasons to get off the ground. So during the first season, Jerry's watching Archie Bunker and the Meathead argue politics. So Jerry writes to Norman Lear and suggests that he do a walk-on cameo as Jerry Rubin. Now, needless to say, that didn't happen, but Norman was flattered by the idea, a suggestion, and wrote back and said, I love your idea. I'll call you if and when I ever do this. So the book starts off with Norman Lear's letter reproduced, full size in the book.
Right.
And then, of course, like most books, it clicks into, Jerry's parents were, like Russian immigrant Jews. Jerry grew up in Cincinnati. His dad was working class, drove a bakery truck. His mom was like a stay-at-home housewife. And one of the reasons I'm pointing that out is, a lot of protesters of the 60s were middle class or upper class, rich white kids, college kids. Jerry was not that. Jerry's parents died when he was about 20. They left behind maybe $5 or $10,000. So Jerry was not protesting Chicago on a trust fund. I just want to point that out.
Well, this is it was not only a great read, Pat, but the photos are phenomenal. All of the, I was just, before I came to the studio tonight, I was reading the Xerox letter that Jerry Rubin wrote to John Lennon. We're going to talk about that relationship and so much more here on the Wall and Power Radio Hour. We have author and drummer and cool cat Pat Thomas on the line from Los Angeles, talking about his great new book called Did It? Jerry Rubin, an American Revolutionary. We're going to have some music interspersed throughout the show, and we're going to end this segment with the great folk singer Phil Oakes, who's also figures prominently in the book, part of Jerry Rubin's history, with his tune, I Ain't Marching Anymore. And then back, more with Pat Thomas on the Wall of Power Radio Hour.
To the Battle of New Orleans at the end of the early British wars. The young land started growing, the young blood started flowing, but I ain't marching anymore. For I killed my share of Injuns in 1,000 different fights. I was there at the Little Big Horn. I heard many men lying, I saw many more dying, but I ain't marching anymore. It's always the old to lead us to the wars, always the young to fall. Now look at all we've won with the saber and the gun. Tell me, is it worth it all?
The number one source of the Twin Cities gay scene is all digital. Follow Twin Cities Gay Scene on Facebook and Twitter. Sign up for the Scene Shot email blast for weekly updates and chances to win great prizes. No app is needed to view the bi-weekly web editions of Scene. It's GLBTQ media for the mobile generation. Find it all at TwinCitiesGayScene.com. That's TwinCitiesGayScene.com.
I'm Richard R.J. Eskow, and this week on the Zero Hour, we'll be discussing political corruption, Wall Street shenanigans, our corporate overlords, digital dystopia, and maybe throw in a surprise or two as well. All this and more on the Zero Hour every Sunday night from 9 until midnight on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota.
As with their Eat Street sister on Nicollet Avenue, the Bad Waitress at 700 Central and Northeast is committed to working with local purveyors and serving organic food whenever possible. But the Northeast location is a bit more grown up. This finer diner has a full bar serving craft cocktails and a brand new inventive dinner menu, including the chicken and waffle, with roasted half chicken, bourbon pickled jalapeno corn waffle, and a roasted poblano gravy. Check out the Northeast menu at thebadwaitress.com.
Crazy about pets? We are too. The Pet Connection Show is a great venue for fun, informative, and creative conversations about pets. Join myself, Kathy Menard, and Dr. Nicole Parole, along with guests who are leaders in the dynamic and growing pet industry, as we discuss healthcare, relationships, behaviors, and even political issues as they relate to our pets. So come, sit, stay for the Pet Connection Show, Sundays 11 a.m. to noon on AM 950 Radio, the progressive voice of Minnesota.
Tap, taste, and treasure at Vinaigrette, where we have some warm seasonal recipes all ready to create dynamite meals. Our fig balsamic vinegar pairs perfectly with roasted Brussels sprouts or baked brie. And sweet potatoes are always a winner, but never more than when they're roasted with a drizzle of vinaigrette cinnamon or orange-fused extra virgin olive oil on top. Come in today for more custom-crafted food and cocktail recipes at Vinaigrette, 50th and Xerxes in Minneapolis and 287 Water Street in downtown Excelsior. Online at vinaigrettemn.com.
Tom Hartman here for All Energy Solar. One of the myths about solar is that you save more if you wait, but waiting to switch can actually cost you more. While tax rebates make solar affordable, those rebates are often limited and decrease over time. So when you wait, you risk losing some of the incentives that make solar so easy to afford today. And besides, the sooner you get your All Energy Solar system, the sooner you reduce or even eliminate that high electricity bill. Make the switch today at allenergysolar.com.
But when you were tending bar, you had a band of
Wall of Power Radio Hour. We just heard a little bit of music, a song called CBGBs by a mutual friend of my guest, Pat Thomas, and mine, a lovely lady named Syd Straw. The reason why I played that, Pat, although we're talking about your great book, Did It, Jerry Rubin, American Revolutionary, but you've been a longtime drummer, and you recently performed in Los Angeles with Syd Straw and some other luminaries.
Yeah, I have a floating collective called Mushroom, where I'm the drummer and band leader. And being in L.A., there's an incredible cross-section of people I gotten to be in the band. DJ Bonebreak of X has been playing vibraphone. David Immergluck from the Counting Crows is on guitar. Victor Krummenacher of Camper Van Beethoven on bass. And Syd was in town for a few months, and Syd to me is the missing link between Janis Joplin and Phyllis Diller.
With her trusty manager dog, Carol Burnett, by her side all the time.
Exactly. So Syd got on stage with us, and it's basically kind of a jazz, rock, psychedelic, free-form thing. And I think she sang some Ramones song over the top of our soft machine Miles Davis grooves, So anyway, that's Syd for you.
Well, and you also had a fellow that I knew a little bit in the 70s. He came out of Minneapolis, John Cruth.
That's right. John Cruth lives in New York but spends half the year in L.A., and John Cruth, for the listeners, he's played with the Violent Femmes, he's played with Camper Van Beethoven, he's played with a lot of people, Hal Wilner. And Cruth plays sitar, flute, mandolin, harmonica. Wonderful cat. And he's
also written a few books himself.
He has. He's written great books about Townes Van Zandt, Roland Kirk, the Beatles. We're kind of kindred beatnik spirits for sure.
So the book, Did It, Jerry Rubin, An American Revolutionary. Let's talk about how did Jerry get involved with social movements and protest?
Well, Jerry grew up in Cincinnati, and in around 1964, he started hearing about the Berkeley free speech movement that was happening at UC Berkeley with Mario Savo. So Jerry drove to Berkeley, caught the tail end of the Berkeley free speech movement, and then Jerry, when you see those documentaries of the troop trains, bringing young soldiers through California to the port of Oakland, where they would then get on a ship to go to Vietnam, Jerry was one of those guys who would lay down on the tracks trying to prevent the trains from going down. So he co-founded something called the VDC, Vietnam Day Committee, and basically led these protests. And Jerry's first big act that became national news is he was subpoenaed by HUAC, the House Un-American Activities Committee. It used to be run by commie hater Joseph McCarthy. So Jerry showed up in Washington, D.C.
And his right-hand man, Roy Cohn, an advisor to President Donald Trump in Donald's early years.
Right. So anyway, Jerry shows up at the Capitol building in 1966 wearing an American Revolutionary War outfit, handing out the Declaration of Independence. And although he was subpoenaed to appear, he's immediately arrested for wearing, looking like Paul Revere or George Washington.
Right.
And so that became national news in 66, and it caught the eye of Abbie Hoffman, who had not done anything like that yet. And so when Jerry arrived in New York in 67, Abbie Hoffman said, I got to meet this guy.
And where was Abbie from, Pat?
Well, Abbie grew up around Boston.
Okay.
But he had been living in New York. Anyway, their next major act that the two of them did together is incredibly infamous. They decided to throw $500 worth of $1 bills onto the New York Stock Exchange trading floor.
Wow, which would be like $3,000 today.
Exactly, and it caused the couple of hundred traders on the floor. It literally shut down the stock exchange because they didn't know how much money it was, so they started grabbing the money and stopped their their trading. And so after that, they put up bulletproof glass or something all around that, so you could never pull off that stunt again.
Wow.
And then their next major thing that Jerry and Abbie do is they decide to lead a march on the Pentagon in October of 67 with Ed Sanders and the Fugs, and they circle the Pentagon with about 5,000 or 10,000 hippies, and they're chanting "out demons out" with the idea that they would levitate the Pentagon.
Right.
So, these types of acts, some people laughed at these guys for this, but the truth of it is their sort of sex, drugs, and rock and roll humor politicized a lot of young people that would not be attracted by, let's say, the SDS's more traditional sort of political science rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jerry really, in fact, even Rennie Davis, who was one of the co-leaders of the SDS, said, in hindsight, Jerry politicized probably more young people than we did, because people like that. The kids love that humor. They love the pranks.
Right. Plus, they were all, all the men all the young men were under the threat of being shipped to Vietnam.
That's exactly right. And Jerry, Allen Ginsberg became part of this movement. Even Norman Mailer did. Obviously, Phil Oakes. And then, a little bit later, even John and Yoko got into the mix.
Yeah, what an incredible time. I mean, I was born in 55, but so I was, 10, 11, 12 when I was getting hip to this. But you'd start to see it, on the evening news and read about it in the newspapers. And it was such, I don't even want to say a slap in the face to conservative America, because I don't think they even knew how to combat this sort of these revolutionary tactics.
Well, exactly. And also, and you lived through this a little, you were a little older than me. This was an era when on a college dorm room wall, there'd be a poster of Angela Davis and Mick Jagger.
Right.
This is an era when politics and music go hand in hand, and it was Jerry who kind of inspired, for better or for worse, John and Yoko to do the "Sometime in New York City" album.
Mm-hmm.
He told them about John Sinclair, and they spoke about Angela Davis and Attica State, and he, personally, I love Lennon's political rants. Not everybody did, but love him or hate him, Jerry was directly responsible for, Rubin. Jerry was responsible for Lennon becoming more militant in those early 70s years.
We're going to talk more about the musical connections that in the circles that Jerry Rubin ran around in all night tonight on the Wall of Power Radio Hour. My guest, Pat Thomas, the author of Did It, Jerry Rubin, An American Revolutionary, will be back after these messages.
Hi, this is Charlie. My dad is Minnesota's wildly popular and handsome radio host, Matt McNeil. Did I say that right, Dad?
Perfect!
When I got my driver's license, my parents let me drive a Sienna from Rudy Luther Toyota. I love it. It's easy, comfortable, and hauls all my baseball gear. And my parents love the safety. That's why they wanted me in the Sienna.
Thanks to Rudy Luther Toyota, my son is safe as he begins his driving adventure. We're a 2 Sienna family thanks to Rudy Luther Toyota. Visit them today in Golden Valley at 169 and 394.
Saturdays at 1 p.m., you have a chance at a fresh start, a new beginning. Hi, everybody. This is Freddie Bell, host of New Beginnings. Our show features the concerns of America's 78 million baby boomers in employment, finance, health and nutrition, spirituality, and even entertainment. Every day is a chance for a fresh start. Join us Saturdays at 1 p.m. for New Beginnings with Freddie Bell on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota.
At Burger Mo's, Mondays no longer need to be a drag. Dine on the beautiful patio for Burger Monday Madness every Monday after 4 p.m., where you can order any burger and fries off menu for just $6. Not valid on Excel event evenings. Burger Mo's offers 20 fresh, never frozen burger varieties, as well as delicious appetizers, soups, salads, and unburgers, dogs, paninis, shakes, and desserts. Located at 242 West 7th Street in St. Paul, with plenty of free parking, and online at burgermos.com.
I'm Steve Conklin.
And I'm Jake Duroff.
We're the hosts of the Mortgage Talk Show, Sundays at 12:30.
Every week we bring you insights on home financing, discussing rates, programs, local and national news.
Whether you're buying your first home or your 100th home, we have tips and inside information to save you money and feel like a mortgage master.
Check us out for more information and email us any questions at mortgagetalkshow.com.
Tune in to the Mortgage Talk Show every Sunday at 12:30 on AM 950.
This summer, you have lots of choices when it comes to your carpet and air duct cleaning, so make it a smart one with Zero Res. Only Zero Res cleans with patent-empowered water, so you know you get healthy, clean carpet that's safe for your family. It's like remodeling, but without the price tag. So schedule your carpet cleaning today and get the Zero Res Summer 3-Room Special. And this month, save $50 when you get your air ducts Zero Res clean. Call 952-ZERO-RES or visit ZeroResMN.com. Zero Res, spell it backwards or forward, it spells the same.
Hi, I'm Scott Peterson with the Minnesota News Network, inviting you to join us for Minnesota Matters, a weekly program covering everything that matters in the North Star State. This week, local reaction to this week's controversial Supreme Court rulings, elder care for an aging Minnesota population, 4th of July safety, and much, much more. Tune us in right here or at MinnesotaNewsNetwork.com.
Listen to Minnesota Matters every weekend, Saturday mornings at 5:30 and Sunday mornings at 6:30 on AM 950.
With your AM 950 weather, I'm Hunter Hawes. Tonight, clear with a low around 67. Sunday, sunny with a high near 89. And Monday, mostly sunny with a high near 87. EatLocalMinnesota.com is your way to find unique local restaurants offering one-of-a-kind food and atmosphere. Your choice of setting from casual to trendy. Great spots for date nights, evenings with friends, or business occasions. Make sure the money you spend stays local. Find out more at EatLocalMinnesota.com.
Welcome back to the Wall of Power Radio Hour. This is your host, Paul Metsa. We hope you've been enjoying this 4th of July weekend. We have a real American on the phone tonight, author and musician and cool cat, Pat Thomas, with his talking about his great book, Did It, Jerry Rubin, an American Revolutionary. Pat, it is almost to the day, the 50th anniversary of the riots in Chicago at the Democratic National Convention in 1968. The timing on this book is perfect.
Yeah, we were talking a few minutes ago about the synergy between music and politics, right, in the 60s. And one of the things that I realized when I was researching my book, that on the first day of the Chicago riots, this is total coincidence, the Beatles released Revolution as a single.
Wow.
And on the last day of the Chicago riots, again, total coincidence, the Stones released Street Fighting Man. Now, obviously, neither the Stones nor the Beatles knew, when they recorded those songs that this event was going to happen. But I just find the coincidence of that just to be mind-boggling. Now, for listeners who are not sure what we're talking about, Bobby Kennedy, unfortunately, was assassinated in early June in California. So at the Chicago Democratic Convention in August of 68, Hubert Humphrey, who was vice president then, is trying to become president. And the Democratic Party is divided against trying to shut down the Vietnam War. Mostly they don't want to do that. And so Jerry Rubin, Abbie Hoffman and the Yippies, Tom Hayden, Rennie Davis and the SDS, literally, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 college kids show up in Chicago to protest the Vietnam War, and Chicago Mayor Daley sends the police out with nightclubs, with the clubs, and they literally are beating these kids.
Right.
And it's on the national news, and the kids start shouting, "The whole world is watching." And Walter Cronkite on CBS News says, "Oh my God, look what these guys are doing." I mean, it was a bloodbath. And this event leads a year later to the Chicago 8 trial. Another weird kismet of rock and roll is the Stones' infamous Gimme Shelter tour. They play in the exact same amphitheater where Hubert Humphrey and the Chicago Democratic Convention took place a year earlier.
Well, and of course, and also at that time, because Minnesota, of course, is, we are proud of all of our politicians and Supreme Court justices, but there was a big rift in the Democratic Party in 1968 between those that were backing Hubert Humphrey and those that wanted the more progressive candidate.
Eugene McCarthy?
Yeah, Eugene McCarthy.
That's right. They were the college kids. It was called "Let's Go Clean" for Gene. And Humphrey was a little bit, without getting too deep into this, Humphrey was, basically a progressive guy, but he was under the thumb of LBJ, who was, still the president. And it was just a very weird time. But, Jerry and Abbie, like I said, the Chicago 8 trial, that's when these guys sort of become, I call them rock stars.
Right.
Because along with, dare I say it, the Charles Manson trial, a year later, decades later, the OJ trial. I mean, this is one of those trials that everybody's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference is that really what this trial was, it was a political trial. It was actually a cultural trial. It was sort of like Nixon was now president, J. Edgar Hoover at the FBI. They're basically putting young people on trial just for having long hair,
right,
and hating the war. And it was really a polarizing time. You talk about the generation gap, parents, arguing with their kids at the dinner table about the Vietnam War.
You know what? Interesting little left turn here, but Donald Trump recently spoke in Duluth, Minnesota, and there was a protester that was holding up a picture, and they escorted him out. And Trump said as he was going out, is that a man or a woman? And then he said, if that's a man, he says, cut your hair.
Wow. I haven't heard that phrase.
Mm-hmm. I haven't. Exactly.
40 years.
Yeah. When you were sitting across from your dad at 13 years old at the dinner table, right?
Exactly.
I know, but just, I just thought that jumped out at me when I was listening to the speech, which I just want to stick large knitting needles into my eyes during the whole thing. But anyway, we're getting a little astray here from.
Yeah, I want to move on to that. John and Yoko moved to New York City in '71.
Can we hold on for 1 second? I want to talk a little bit more about the Chicago 8 trial because there was Pegasus involved, the pig, that I think they ran for president in '68. But there was another character who you've gotten to know, who I've been a big fan of mine for years, one of the founding fathers of the Yippies, Paul Krasner.
Oh, okay. Well, Paul Krasner, it was, a little older than these guys. And so in the late 50s, I believe, he starts publishing a political satire magazine called The Realist. And for those who've never read The Realist, think about, let's say, something like Mad Magazine, except it's all political. Right. Cartoons and all kinds of weird satire. Krasner was so outrageous that when when JFK was assassinated in Dallas, Krasner.
I don't know if we should tell that story.
Okay, we won't tell that story.
Yeah, but that was. Yeah, it was incredibly.
Let's just say that Krasner was insinuating that LBJ and JFK had sex. We'll just leave it.
Yeah, right. So, but then also. Krasner was also, for a while, a roommate of Lenny Bruce's.
Yeah, Krasner was friends with Lenny Bruce. Krasner later came up with the theory, if you're familiar with San Francisco politics, you remember Mayor George Moscone and the great gay rights leader Harvey Milk being assassinated by this guy named Dan White. At Dan White's trial...
Too many Twinkies.
Too many Twinkies, right. Well, Krasner came up with the phrase Twinkie defense.
Right.
Krasner's become a friend of mine. He's alive and fairly well, living in Palm Desert in California, well into his 80s, and really an incredible guy.
I'd love to bring him out here to chat with him on my birthday, November 1st. I've been wanting to do that for years. I bumped into Paul a couple times over the years, and I think he's one of the most brilliant minds of our time.
We can talk about that after.
Great. So let's go now. Let's go to you wanted to hop 72 with John and Yoko.
Yeah. So John and Yoko arrived in New York in '71, and the first thing they do is search out Jerry Rubin. They had seen Jerry on the David Frost show in London in '70. And Jerry decided to shut the David Frost show was broadcast live, and Jerry shut it down when he started smoking a joint and asked David Frost if he wanted a toke. And so John and Yoko loved that sort of political guerrilla theater, and they became fast friends. And I think I'm losing track here if we talked about this on the air or off the air, but I was saying, it was Jerry that first told John Lennon about John Sinclair being arrested.
You mentioned that early in the show.
Okay.
But
so
keep on. Expand on that a little bit.
Okay. So if you're a Beatles fan, probably the thing most people remember about Lennon in this era is they tried to deport him. And one of the reasons they were trying to deport Lennon in the 70s is because Nixon and J. Edgar Hoover were pissed that he had aligned himself with Jerry Rubin, because they knew that, even an ex-Beatle had an incredible sway on young people. And as they saw Lennon getting more and more political, they said, we got to get this guy out of the country. And that's when they started to try to refuse Lennon his green card. Now, one of the things I found out as I dug deeper with the idea that truth is always stranger than fiction, there was actually a group of guys in the White House led by Gordon Liddy, and they were known as CREEP, Committee to Re-elect the President.
Perfect name.
Perfect name for these creeps, right? So Liddy goes to Ehrlichman and says, I want to kidnap Jerry Rubin and Abbie Hoffman and hold them in a Mexican prison until the November 72 trial.
Wow.
And Ehrlichman says, dude, that's even too freaky for me. I'm not authorizing that. Now, Rubin, of course, doesn't hear about this until many years later. And the thing I love about Jerry is his sense of humor. He says, I really wish they had kidnapped me, because I would have become even more infamous with a Free Jerry movement.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, later, unfortunately, when Lennon kind of resurfaces in 1980, he makes the Double Fantasy record, he really disowned his political 70s, what do we call it? But, and that was really pissing Jerry off, because Lennon was really denouncing the Yippies in 1980. And finally, they had sort of a public war, like in People or magazine or something. And Jerry just said, hey, John, you were an adult man when you decided to write those political songs. I didn't put a gun to your head. You need to own this. So, for Beatles fans, there's about 30 or 40 pages of all kinds of stuff with A.J. Weberman, Dylan, John Sinclair. If you're interested in Lennon's early 70s stuff, I was able to get David Peel to talk to me before he died. There's a lot of really incredible stories about John and Yoko in New York in the 70s in my book.
Pat, I have to, because we always have interesting stories that you might not have heard about in the mainstream media, but on the Wall of Power Radio Hour, I had a long-time Twin Cities weatherman named Barry Zavan on a couple of years ago, and Barry's in his 80s now, but he was a weatherman in Washington, D.C. during the early 70s and became close friends with John Ehrlichman. When Ehrlichman got out of prison, he moved to Arizona. He and Barry remained friends, and they were in the pool one day when there was a delivery from Richard Nixon's people, and they were presenting Ehrlichman with the book that Nixon had out on that time, and rather than signed to John, it was just stamped Richard Nixon. Anyway, kind of guy Tricky Dick was. We've got Pat Thomas on the line. We're going to have him on for one more segment on the Wall of Power Radio Hour. Let's listen to a little bit of John Lennon playing New York City.
number one source of the Twin Cities gay scene is all digital. Follow Twin Cities Gay Scene on Facebook and Twitter. Sign up for the Scene Shot email blast for weekly updates and chances to win great prizes. No app is needed to view the bi-weekly web editions of Scene. It's GLBTQ media for the mobile generation. Find it all at TwinCitiesGayScene.com. That's TwinCitiesGayScene.com.
Hi, this is Laura Hedlund with Food Freedom Radio. We want a regenerative revolution. What's that? It's a food system that works for water, soil, pollinators, and people. How do we get it? Maybe by being a little more lazy. So this summer, we're looking for lazy good food recipes. We're talking about how do we create a sane, kind food system. Food Freedom Radio, Saturdays at 8 a.m. or anytime on podcast. AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota.
Unbeatable prices? Warner Stellian guarantees it on hundreds of top-rated appliances, including laundry pairs starting at $3.99 each, free installation on select Bosch and KitchenAid dishwashers, hundreds saved on French door refrigerators. We have discounts on air conditioners, and we install. You'll save even more in-store on top brands. We guarantee unbeatable prices. Warner Stellian offers qualified buyers 18 months zero-interest financing for a limited time, and only from Minnesota's original appliance specialist, Warner Stellian.
Connections Radio Show is all about tapping into our hardwired hunger to connect. We examine meaningful connections to ourselves, our community, and the world around us. By opening the door to innovative insights by a wide variety of interesting guests, we'll make the connections to something bigger than ourselves. Join me, Lori Fitz, your host of Connections Radio Show, and together we'll make the connections. Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota.
Woodland Stoves and Fireplaces is having its annual store-wide sale. For the entire month of July, all of our indoor and outdoor fireplace products and accessories are at their lowest price of the year. At Woodland Stoves and Fireplaces, we display, explain, and install the Twin Cities' most diverse selection of indoor and outdoor stoves and fireplaces, including metal and masonry pizza ovens.
I love my wood stove. We enjoy the sense of well-being we get by cutting and splitting wood to warm our home. Wood is our choice, but you may have other choices at Woodland Stoves and Fireplaces. Whether transforming an existing fireplace or adding something new, a clean burning wood, gas, or electric fire can have you sitting pretty and cozy by the fire. Visit Woodland Stoves and Fireplaces today and find the right fire for you.
Come see us. We have over 35 working displays in our store, which is just off I-94 at the corner of Riverside and East Franklin Avenue in Minneapolis. Woodland Stoves and Fireplaces, since 1977, out of the ordinary products and services to make fire work for you.
Waking up is easy when you look forward to breakfast, served 7 days a week at the Downtowner Woodfire Grill in St. Paul. Try eggs your way with hash browns, bacon, or sausage. There are 4 delicious varieties of Eggs Benedict that should not be missed, and buttermilk pancakes, waffles, or French toast are always fresh off the griddle. How about a Bloody Mary or screwdriver from the bar? The Downtowner Woodfire Grill is located at 253 West 7th Street with plenty of free parking, or online at downtownerwoodfire.com.
Come to San Diego, whole world gonna swing. I'm going to San Diego, let them brass bells ring. Oh, Mr. San Diego, find out what my future brings.
Welcome back to the Wall of Power Radio Hour. This is your host, Paul Metsa. My guest for the whole show tonight, author Pat Thomas, with his great new book, Did It? Jerry Rubin, an American Revolutionary. We just heard Allen Ginsberg singing Going to San Diego. Pat, tell us a little bit about that tune.
Well, we mentioned earlier in the show that I interviewed, about 75 people, and I interviewed a lot of famous people, Paul Krasner and Rennie Davis, Bobby Seale, Judy Gumbo. But some of the funniest stories came from people who, people had never really had heard of. So originally the Republican convention of 72 was going to be held in San Diego. And so, the Yippies knew that they were going to be protesting as they had in 68. And so Jerry flies into LA and he gets picked up at the airport by this DJ at the time named Larry Yurden. And they go to rent a car in Jerry's name. So Jerry goes into this car rental place, and the car rental guy goes, "Now wait a minute, are you the Jerry Rubin, right?" And Jerry's like, "I don't know what you're talking about. You know that political bad guy. Are you that guy?" Jerry's like, "Never heard of him," right? So
just give me the damn car.
Yeah. So right. So Jerry and Larry, rent the car, and they're heading to San Diego from L.A. And Jerry starts laughing. He said, in about a half an hour, he goes, that rental car place is going to be swarming with FBI agents asking, why did you rent him a car and where is he going?
Right.
This, I was mentioning earlier about John and Yoko coming to New York. So there's a lot of things happening in New York City in 1971. One is Bob Dylan moves back to New York after living in Woodstock for many years. And Dylan is being harassed by people like A.J. Weberman for not being political enough. So one of the things that Bob does is he writes this incredible song called George Jackson about a, Black Power, Black Panther guy who was murdered in San Quentin prison that year earlier. And when John Lennon hears the song George Jackson, he's like, oh my God. He goes, Dylan's getting political again. And people are getting very, very excited about Bob being back in Manhattan and sort of plugging into things. Meanwhile, Ginsey had always been obsessed with Dylan, and Ginsey, he'd had all the success as a poet, but he always kind of wanted to be a little bit of a rock star.
Right.
He convinces Dylan to go into the studio, and they do half an album together with Ginsey obviously providing lyrics and vocals, and Bob writing the music and singing along. And so what we just heard was this anti-Nixon, anti-Vietnam War protest song called Going to San Diego with Ginsberg on vocals and Bob on guitar. And, also in their orbit at this time is Rubin, because basically Rubin has this idea. The voting age has just been reduced from 21 to 18. And so Rubin has John and Yoko convinced that they travel around the country playing free concerts and then getting people to register to vote. And they were really trying to rope Dylan into this. Now, anyone who knows Dylan would never do a political tour like this. But nevertheless, in my book is a great interview with Jerry Rubin's girlfriend at the time, Kathy Stream, who talks about Dylan surprisingly showing up at Rubin's apartment out of the blue. And there's a complete transcription of their conversation and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of really incredible 6 degrees of separation. It turns out that Norman Mailer was a big fan of Jerry Rubin's, and there's all kinds of Norman Mailer, Jerry Rubin stories in my book. We were talking about Phil Oakes. Phil and Jerry were incredibly tight. So yeah, it was really a magical time.
And what was part of that, the Phil Oakes story has a very tragic part to it. He never quite got the success that he probably deserved, and also in his later years suffered from depression and being bipolar, and then coupled with some snubs by Dylan, not getting invited on the Rolling Thunder tour and whatever, ended up hanging himself in his sister's apartment in Queens, which was really sad. And so you have a lot of that. It's a very interesting book. I would want to recommend everybody out there that's interested in the times, American protest, to get Pat Thomas's book, Did It, Jerry Rubin, An American Revolutionary. Pat, we got a couple minutes left. Let's segue into how Jerry Rubin ended up on Wall Street.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. A lot of people think that Jerry became a Republican. He was a liberal Democrat. People think he supported Reagan. He never supported Reagan. Basically, Jerry put on a suit and tie, and he showed up at Wall Street. And the other myth, fake news, is that Jerry was not a stockbroker. He was not trying to get people to invest in Exxon or Shell or Bell Helicopters or anything like that. Jerry was actually marketing solar panels, green energy, and ecology in 1980 on Wall Street when nobody wanted to know about it. And
way ahead of his time.
Way ahead of his time. And so the fact that Jerry put on a suit and a tie, the fact that, yes, Jerry was part of what became known as the Yuppie movement, but Jerry was leading a very progressive, very liberal wing of the whole Yuppie thing. And Jerry actually, my first book about the Black Panthers, I talk about this. The Panthers by the early 70s are running for mayor and city council in Oakland because they realize that, for better or for worse, change comes from within, right? And so Jerry wanted to make money. He was in his 40s, wanted to have a nice house, a nice car. But Jerry realized that change came from within, and he was kind of leading his own little, macro revolution kind of from the inside out. And a lot of people do not know that. They think that Jerry was just on Wall Street, being a jerk.
And when I was skimming the book, worked for a firm called John Muir Investments, which I had to think has something to do with the great John Muir, who's got a great national park named after him north of San Francisco. We just have a few seconds left, Pat, here. How can people track down the book? What's your website? Give us the info.
Okay. The book is, again, we've mentioned it a million times. It's called Did It? Jerry Rubin, American Revolutionary. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble websites. It's published by Fantagraphics. You can get it on their website. Any decent bookstore can order it. It's not that hard to find. If you just Google the book title, Jerry Rubin Did It, I'm sure there's about a half a dozen ways you can get it. Yeah.
Well, Pat, thank you so much for your time today. Have a wonderful 4th of July weekend. You're a patriot in my eyes, and always enjoy speaking with you, my friend.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks for listening to the Wall of Power Radio Hour. The show is produced by Paul Metsa, engineered by the great Brett Johnson, right here at AM 950 Studios. Watch my TV show, Wall of Power TV, every Saturday night, Comcast Channel 6 at 8 and 11:30 p.m., or stream from mcn6.org. Happy 4th of July weekend, everybody. And like my dad used to tell me, remember to be kind and make someone happy. Peace.
Hey, sounds good. Oh, I didn't know that was on channels.